G'day, I'm Nick Topham from ProductRex, and this is our intermediate training module. So the idea behind this is that you have already completed the introductory training and got a bit of a feel of the base functions of ProductRex. And what I'm going to do today is show you a couple more advanced features, nothing terribly complex, but just things you may not have noticed as you're working through that introductory section. So in this scenario today, you can see I've already set up an account, but basically what we're going to do is we're going to import some data. We're going to do a rebalance. We're going to have a play around with what we call Sandbox mode, which is some more interesting tools around rebalances and account reviews and that sort of stuff. And I'm going to show you a few other functions that you may have missed working through that introductory module. So let's get started. Like I said, we've got this account set up. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import some data. So in this scenario, we're going to imagine this client has a BT Panorama account, just chosen arbitrarily. So we're going to import. Up the top right, you'll see this button that says Import Platform. Click that. There is a whole bunch of options for the different wrap accounts. Select the one you want. I'm going to choose BT. Now, in all of these, you'll see this video icon here. You'll see this a lot throughout ProductRex, and this just means there's a tutorial. So all of these have little different tutorials, which basically show you where to get this file from. Watch that tutorial. We're not going to watch it today because we don't need to. I already know how to do it. But basically, watch that tutorial, find the file that you want. I've already got one prepared on my computer. And select the platform type and hit import. They're all pretty similar, but basically do that. And you can see what it's done now is it's created a BT account for us, and it's also created our investments within there. So for you, when you're doing account reviews, when you are doing rebalances, super pension transfers, whatever it is, if you've got one that's in those platforms in that list, import the data, save you a lot of time. Once it's imported, it's exactly the same as if you had added it manually. It'll still go ahead and do things like add your your fee groups and your investments and your asset allocation, and everything's normal. You just don't have to do it. All right, so we've created our BT, which is our current account. We're going to also keep it in recommended. We're doing a rebalance today. So the best way to do that is to hit duplicate and then click and drag it over to recommended. Then we're going to jump into our recommended platform, and we are going to do a rebalance in this case. So you can see here, maybe the cash is a little bit high. We might want to rejig that. Now you can just go in here and start changing these figures or deleting assets or adding new assets. It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is a much better way to do it by clicking this Sandbox mode button up the top here. The idea behind Sandbox mode is it's essentially just a bunch of tools to make rebalancing accounts and reviewing accounts much easier. So you can see a whole lot more options have appeared. The first, which you can see, is that we also have the option for percentages now. So you can see it'll show all of the percentages of your different assets. And if you click this little dollar button here, or percentage, it will actually toggle between them. So, I might actually say I only want cash account to be 5%. I want this ClearBridge down to 30, this Lazard up to 20, whatever. You can go ahead, make your changes. You can toggle back to dollars if you really want. That's all fine. So that's the first thing. Now, you'll see I've made some arbitrary changes over here, and as a result, it's giving me a little alert over here where it says balance account, and it's saying there are funds unallocated. There's 32,000 unallocated, right? So first up, that's just a warning, essentially. So you can be like, you know what? I'm going to go in, I'm going to bump this Vanguard up to 30,000. We still got 14,000 short. Maybe bump this Vanguard up to 40,000. Whatever it may be, it is just alert. But what you can actually do is if you use this little plus minus button next to your investments, and essentially what that will do is it will dump or subtract if there's a surplus. So if there's a surplus or an unallocated amount, it will actually take that off the investment you click. So if I click this Magellan, for example, it will put that remaining 6,000 onto the Magellan. It's just a really quick way to clean up those residual amounts that you may have after doing a rebalance. So that's a really useful function there. Of course, when you're ready, just click update, and it's going to, save all of those investments for us. There's a few more things you can do on this screen. Over on cash account, you notice it's got its own little icon, which says set cash to minimum. So essentially what this will do, it will actually just reduce your cash account down to the minimum available for that platform. That will obviously change depending on the platform and the platform's particular cash account. So I've done that, and I might just also dump the last bit in this Lazard here, whatever it may be, that's fine. So another little function there. You can see now it's gone down to minimum, that icon's disappeared. The final thing in Sandbox mode is if you imagine, again, this is a super account, perhaps this client's made a $100,000 non-concessional contribution, right? So they started off with 216, but actually you're working up to 316. So you can use this target balance functionality here to actually change what you're aiming at. So we're aiming now at 316,000, and you can see our balance has shown us, yes, okay, we're now 100K short, and you can change the investments to that amount. In this case here, I am actually not going to do that. We're going to keep it as a rebalance and keep the balance the same. But of course, you could do that if you're doing, perhaps it's a non-concessional contribution, perhaps it's a withdrawal from, a pension or an investment wrap or something like that. So these are all options. And the idea behind Sandbox mode is just to keep it flexible, so it can work in the way you want it, rather than you having to, fit a set of guidelines. Okay. That's all I want to do for this rebalance. If I go back to this client up here, you can see we've done our changes that we wanted to. Now, really, really important thing when you are rebalancing accounts, you only need to do this when you're rebalancing accounts, and that is this button here that says Match Platform. Now, essentially what this does is if you click that, you'll see over here, we've only got one option here, but you'll see over here, the match platform will light up and we click it. And essentially you'll see there's a 1 and a 1 next to them. And what you've now done is told the system this is the same account. So this is going to affect things like transaction fees, buy, sells, brokerage, all that sort of stuff. It'll make your output tables look a little bit nicer too. But just be aware of that. Of course, if you have multiple platforms in current or recommended, you can match multiple platforms together, like if you're rebalancing two accounts. So just be aware of that. That's all you've got to do. There's no more complexity than that. So in terms of a rebalance, we're most of the way there. The only other thing you might like to do is do your alternative research. In this scenario, the best thing to do is a dupe and swap. You would have seen that in the introductory video, which is simply duplicating our recommended platform, dragging it over to recommended, and swapping it to something else. So let's swap this to net wealth, for example, and I might do another one to something else, maybe first wrap. There we go. So again, that's just a really quick way of spinning out some alternatives. One thing to note with your alternatives, you'll notice up in the alternatives, in the total fees up here, it's actually summed them together. So the way to resolve that is to rank them and basically tell them this isn't the same alternative, it's alternative 1 and alternative 2. Best way to do that is this little button here called toggle alternative rank. Click that once or twice and it's going to go A, B, C, D, whatever you want. And you'll see it will split them out accordingly. Of course, like I said, you can have 2 A's, you might have net wealth and cash, 2 B's, first wrap and cash, or something like that, so that's flexible too. Another thing you will have noticed in these alternatives over here is we get a little alert, and there's a few things going on in this case here. The first one, it's telling us that for net wealth, the cash account is below the minimum balance. It's also telling us that 2 of our recommended investments are actually not available there. It's going to be a fairly similar alerts going on for first wrap down the bottom there. But basically, whenever you see that alert, just hover over it. It's going to tell you what's going on. And if you then click into the platform, it'll give you some more instructions on how to resolve them. Again, you can actually just ignore them if you want. If you don't really care and you just want some numbers, just ignore them. It's not going to affect anything. Okay, so we've done a little rebalance here and we've done our alternatives. Another thing you're probably going to ask about is family fee aggregation. So BT Panorama is probably not the best example to use here because their cap is, I think, $1 million. So, but we'll work with it anyway. So family fee aggregation we do in 2 different ways. So if you do just have 2 accounts, let's just add another BT. You'll see this little button here is going to light up, and if you click it, it will just show us these platforms are linked. Now, like I said, BT is not the best example because their breakpoint is $1 million, and we're obviously not there. But if you do go above those tier groups, it will, of course, automatically adjust your fees. To demonstrate this, for example, if we just duplicate this net wealth one over here, you'll see as we add that other one in, it will adjust the fees downwards because of that family fee linking. So that's one way to do family fee linking. On the other hand, if you have, perhaps this person is linked to a sibling or a parent or even a child, and you don't want to add the platform in, we can do it a different way. So if you click family fee linking, let's say, yep, this guy's brother's got $1 million. We can type in $1 million as a manual adjustment, hit save, and it will adjust our fees for us. You can see the BT fees changed in this case because we've gone above that $1 million cap for their fees. So that's how we deal with family fee aggregation. Of course, it works, if you've got a BT super pension investment or any platform for that matter, it works across those different entities. It just depends on, who the product provider is. Okay, so we basically done really all the work that's involved here with the rebalance. The final thing you'd obviously want to do is go through, click Get ProductRex up the top and actually generate your document. Again, you've done that as part of the introductory training. I'm not going to rehash that today. You just click the button, it generates your document. There are, however, a few little additional things that I would like to show you that are really going to improve the quality of that output document. The first of which is you've probably seen this little star here next to our various platforms, a hollow or a filled star. And this is essentially your subjective ratings of a platform. So if I click First Strap, I'm going to click First Strap because it's hollow. That's already filled out. Let's use BT. There we go. If you click BT, for example, you can see this one. I've actually already gone through and done a lot of these ratings here. But if you go into this for the first time, these will be empty. But you can basically go through and give your subjective experience with a platform, depending on what it's been, and you can actually use this to reinforce your basis for advice. I will just reinforce that I have no particular affiliation with any of these platforms, and these ratings are in my account, and they've just been done arbitrarily. They're not reflective of the platforms at all. But in any case, you may want to go through, give them 5 stars for this, 2 stars for whatever, and basically give them these ratings. And what you'll find then is in your output document, let's say in an imaginary scenario, they're moving from a really, really cheap industry fund to a somewhat more expensive wrap. The question is why? So basically you can use these ratings to reinforce your basis for advice, and that will come through in that output document in kind of a nice narrative form. So it's a really good way to improve the basis for advice and save you having to do any manual typing out of narrative. So very, very highly recommend doing this. Again, if you go through, for example, and rate BT or whatever it is in your account, next time you recommend BT, you don't have to go through and do those ratings again. Those are persistent between scenarios. You can change them if you want, but you don't have to. So very powerful. I do recommend exploring that rate platform functionality. Again, there's a more extended tutorial up here if you did want to watch that. Okay, the other thing I'm going to show you on this page before we have a look at a few other options within accounts is up the top here, which is client mode, this button here. So if I click this, you'll see my colors change and also the logo disappears up the top. So the idea behind client mode is that you can click this and customize the look and feel of ProductRex to your practice. So you can see this imaginary blue financial I've made up with these imaginary colors. But the idea is that you can then turn your laptop screen around or put it up on a monitor or something like that and talk to product recommendations with your client. You can see we also actually mask the product names, so we won't call them by their names. And same goes for the investments. Again, so you're not seen as giving any advice before anything's signed. It's just a very useful way to illustrate fees, to illustrate asset allocation, that sort of stuff, without having to get into kind of really dry product stuff. As a side note, you can turn those names back on if you wish. Just click the unmask button up the top and it'll turn them back on if you wish. So that is client mode up the top. You set this up yourself. If you click that and it's not set up, it'll take you, 10 seconds. You just pick a couple of colors and upload a logo. It's very, very easy to set up on your own account. So that's client mode, which again is a very, very useful feature. The final piece I'm going to show you in the puzzle for today is this little button up here, and this is called Reweight Platforms. So imagine in this case, the clients actually come to you with their existing BT Pano Super account. For whatever reason, the balance was wrong. Perhaps they forgot to tell you about something, and this cash account's actually 148,000, right? They're 100K off. Okay, so if we just do that, and go back, you can see now our current doesn't match our recommended or alternatives. But in this case, perhaps you actually want to keep those exact percentages you've recommended, but for the higher balance. So, you could go in here and change these figures and just update it by percentage, but that's kind of tedious. So what you can use up here is called reweight platforms. And basically this lets you change the value of platforms en masse. So I can change these to 316,966. And basically what it'll do is it'll automatically prorate those platforms that I've selected to that new amount. So it's just a really quick way, especially if you're doing a rollover and the client says, oh, I've got 100K in an industry fund, and next week they look it up and it's 150. Those kind of scenarios, usually you'd have to go through and rekey all the data, but you can actually just use this reweight button up the top. It saves you a lot of time. Okay, that is everything we go through in this intermediate training for today. And certainly I encourage you to get in there and have a play around with those features. Thanks.